everyone. My name is the Theme Park Evangelist. So, this has been a very unusual week for me. Not only am I, or was I behind, I should say, on filming and uploading my How to Stay Faithful and Focused on God During Difficult Times vlog for various reasons, but I am going to go ahead and film my random vlog for the week, which normally I would have it uploaded on Wednesday evening, but due to the fact that my How to Stay Faithful and Focused on God vlog got uploaded officially on Wednesday evening instead, which is very unusual. And the reason why I try doing the evenings is because during the work week, who's got time to watch a vlog up until the evening? So why not, during the work week anyway, publish all my vlogs during the during the evening hours, and during the weekend, who cares? Because most people are usually off anyway and can just watch it whenever. And even if they're not out and about, who cares anyway? Because they're going to watch it eventually at some point during that daytime. And then I also know a lot of my audience is free on weekends. So anyway, I'm taking advantage of the little bit of free time I have here in the hotel before it gets any later. So needless to say, I am staying here at my work for free because of a snow emergency, but the catch is I'm on call all night long. But anyway, this week I wanted to talk to you guys about how I felt about tithing in Florida versus how I feel about tithing now. Shouldn't be a terribly too long vlog, but the reason why I want to talk to you guys about this particular topic is because I just got done with church. The past 2 weeks we've been doing a sermon series, maybe even 3 weeks, but anyway, on how the importance of tithing. So I wanted to start obviously with Florida. So naturally on Sunday mornings, I would tithe, and I also was one of the deacons. And if I was ever serving as a deacon that morning, I would throw in my 20 once I got to the back, and then I would go and count it later on. And if this says anything, back then, I probably tithed about $1,000 a year. Now, you're probably wondering, how on earth did I tithe so much in just 1 year as a young person? Well, let's investigate that, shall we? So when I worked for Publix, I'm not afraid to say this now because it's been a very long time. And don't forget, this was the pay rate I made back then from Publix. That doesn't mean this information is accurate whatsoever these days. Not by a million years. So I was working for Publix. I was part-time, for one thing. Secondly, this was from early high school, or second year of high school, all the way through my late college years. And I still even had another 2 years to go after I moved up here to Kentucky. So when I was living in Florida, we'll start with high school. I was just working on the weekends. I was working Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That was it. And then when I got out of high school into college, then I was working about 15 to 30 hours a week, give or take on how busy it was. And generally on Saturday mornings, they would give me an hour-long break because they had enough staff and it was slow enough that they were able to afford to lose me for an hour. Even if I tried to beg for a half-hour break, they would say, "No, sorry, David, you still have to go take that hour." So I was like, whatever. So all Publixes have a ATM called Presto. It's just the name of the ATM company, I guess, that does Publix's ATMs. I don't know. And I stop in. I pull out 40. I would pull out 20 for offering, and I pull out 20 for breakfast. And I thought that was a very decent amount. Now, let's also stop here for a second. I also was making about $250 a week every Thursday, but I also had no bills back then. So I didn't really care about how much I was spending. And I thought that, out of that $250 that I was earning on a weekly basis, and let's just, do the math here. 250 times 10%. So I was only technically shorting God $5 on a weekly basis, and sometimes I did give God an extra few bucks. And it was like, you're such a great Christian, David. Good job. And, I'm surprised that God didn't strike me dead like Ananias and whatever you call them, Ananias and Sephora. I'm not saying the jewelry store or anything, but the two people who intentionally kept tithing from God and God struck them dead. I don't remember their names offhand, but there were times when I was like, seriously, God, like, why didn't you? Like, God obviously had a reason to keep me alive all these years. And then I would, walk over to Perkins, back when there used to be a Perkins in that same plaza, and it was a good walk. And I walked down there, and I ordered coffee, water, and breakfast. And I would have an entire pot of coffee all to myself. I would give the waitress my 20. I pay for the drink and the food, and then I give a very generous tip. And then I go home. I go home. I go back to work. If I felt like the tip was going to be too much, I put that, like, let's say an extra $3 towards the offering. It really just depends on what I got that day. And so I was giving about 10% every single week, or I was trying to give as close to 10% of my wages every single week. And I didn't always make $250. That was if it was a good week. And I still was trying to do 10%. I was doing at least 10%, if not more than 10%. And this was every single Saturday. I pull out $40, 20 for God, 20 for breakfast. If I was ever working a Saturday, and sometimes I didn't even go to Perkins. Sometimes I'd go down to Golden Corral, and I still pull out 40, 20 for breakfast, and I would leave a tip. And back then, I admit it, I used to be desperate for a girlfriend. In fact, I leave my digits and a winky face or a smiley face on the receipt, and the waitress probably balled it up and threw it away. But they probably were like, oh, thank you for the tip. But I always left a tip every single time. And I always liked to go out for breakfast every single Saturday. That's just what I did back then. If I didn't go out for breakfast, I went out for lunch or dinner. I became very well acquainted with a lot of local restaurants back then. Actually, I was very disappointed and depressed when I found my favorite local barbecue restaurant in Winter Haven, not just Manny's, but Shaq's Barbecue had to close down at the beginning of the year because her husband, that's their last name, by the way, Shaq, passed away suddenly, and she couldn't run it by herself anymore. And I knew them pretty well, so I was hurt. But in between pulling out money for offering and pulling it out for food, I was spending a lot of money every single week. But you know what? I just kept doing it. And the thing is, yes, I was giving 10%, but I wasn't doing it with a cheerful heart. And that's something that's very well um, spoken about in the Bible, is God likes a cheerful giver. And I was just throwing the 20 in just because I wanted to. Yes, I kind of wanted to, but I was also doing it. Let me rephrase this. Yes, I wanted to get that 20 every single week, and God loved that. But at the same time, I was also looking at it as like, look, God, here's another 20. Oh, look, God, here's another 20. Oh, look, God, here's another 20. And it's almost like it became, to me, like a show off for me. It's almost like I started letting it become too much of a good thing. I almost started expecting to be able to afford it every single week. And, they always say with tithes and offerings that we should, enjoy doing it. We should, you know, be appreciative of the money that God has given us and then want to give back to God and not turn around and use it as kind of, I don't even know how to put it, but use it as a way to kind of, I don't know, maybe make fun of God, poke fun of God, or even show God, like, oh, look at me, like, look what I got. And just eventually, when I left Publix, unfortunately, my tithing kind of stopped, I hate to say. And as soon as I left Serve Church, my tithing kind of came to a halt, which is not a good thing. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that I wasn't making that weekly paycheck anymore. I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that I was no longer part of the tithes and offerings committee anymore. I don't know if it's my just moving to a whole new state changed me. I don't know. I could sit there and make speculations all day. But I'll tell you guys this one thing right now. My whole perspective on tithes and offerings have changed. Now, I admit it. I had more than enough opportunities while I was working at the airport to tithe, and I chose not to. And I was off every single Sunday, and I didn't do it. And what was my reasoning? I didn't have a reasoning. I didn't have a valid excuse. The thing is, I put it out of my mind. That was my problem. And I really believe that God decided to teach me a lesson, but a good lesson, by allowing me to go and work at a job where my hours are going to be cut back so badly to the point where I was wondering where I was going to get all my money, and then come back and remind me, oh, by the way, you still owe me. And sometimes I wonder, like, why weren't you, asking me for this money over the summer when I was making a ton of it at the airport? Well, I tried to, but you weren't listening. Yeah, you got a point there. Just looking at the window to see if the nasty weather started up again. It has not. But the roads are very slick out there. I can see that from the room. I can definitely feel my energy starting to fade. I don't even know how I'm going to find the energy to do any homework, but I'll try. So, now that I'm working at this hotel and I'm basically making strings, I'm constantly wondering, well, how am I going to be able to pay the offering when I can't even barely make ends meet with the groceries, with the bills, with the utilities? And God's like, well, guess what? You still owe me anyway. This is my money after all. Like, God's trying to pull subtle hints to remind me this is my money by, like, reminding me at church. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And sometimes it can be discouraging. I will not lie. And it's like, where am I going to get this kind of money? But guess what? God just kind of saying, I will provide. I will provide, but you still owe me. And I'm like, okay. Like, I'll do my best. I know you will, but you still owe me. So, I was at church on Sunday, and I knew I had to tithe. And then I got asked again that night, "Do you tithe?" And I'm thinking to myself, how can I tithe when I barely make ends meet? But yes, I didn't. The only part I said out loud was, "Yes, I tithe," but that's what I thought in my mind. And I opened my bank account, and I'm just being reminded, you need to tithe. You need to tithe. And I'm not even joking. I'm hearing it all the time now. And back then I would have been like, all right, God, here's another 20. There's my 20 for the week. I'll see you again next week with the next 20. And that was what I kind of thought I had. And these days I'm like, oh, where am I gonna get the money? It's like I got this, and this too, but I still got to find some kind of money to put towards tithes. Like, well, I guess I can do what I can for now. And I mean, I tithed a few bucks. It's like, this is kind of insulting to God, but at the same time, I know I need to do something. I know at the end of the day, all this money belongs to Him, but I also know God appreciates the fact that I gave Him anything. And I also know for a fact that I will be able to give Him more later. And I don't know when that later is, but God does know. And I know for a fact that God is going to do God, I shouldn't say God's going to do His best, but God is going to make sure that I have more money later on. And I'm going to make sure that He gets more. Because at the end of the day, it's His money. And that's the one thing He just keeps reminding me about. Like, don't forget, dude, it's my money. It's not yours. And it's like, oh, shoot. Guess you got a point there. I mean, it's hard. But at the end of the day, He's right. He is right. So, before I close here, and I told you guys this was going to be a shorter one. What are the main takeaways from this? You need a tithe. All the money belongs to God. And God will provide, no matter what happens. And I think the other thing I really want you guys to understand is, don't just throw in a 20 every single week just because you have the money for it, without having a I don't care attitude about it, which is basically what I was doing back then. My biggest problem I wanted you guys to kind of hear was, I was doing it. Yes, I was doing it cheerfully, but at the end of the day, I had a very I don't care attitude about it. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but I did. The thing is, these days, I do care. I care about every penny I give. I care about that $4 I give now. Back then, I would have been like, oh, God doesn't want $4, but I guess it's better than nothing. And then, I still would have been like, all right, God, there you go. And I would have been like, wow, what a great Christian I am. And then the one last thing I wanted you guys to think about that I was doing back then is I was being very proud about everything I was giving. God wants us to be humble when we give. God doesn't want us to be like Pharisees and go around praising ourselves just because, we were giving God money, because then God's going to be like, well, then I don't want it. Take it back. I'm serious. I mean, even though it's His, because it came with the wrong attitude. I mean, I'm just going to give you guys a Bible story really quick here. The story of Cain and Abel, before, Cain killed Abel. So, both Cain and Abel gave gifts to God. Cain gave God vegetables, fruits, and God goes, I don't want that. And Cain goes, but it's my gift. And God says, well, it's your heart's in the right place, but unfortunately, it's not biblical. And Cain goes, oh. And then Abel did follow what the Bible commanded, and Abel gave him a blood sacrifice. And God said, I accept your gift. Both of them did sacrifices, but only Abel did his biblically. And that's why God accepted his, but not Cain's. So there is a reason for everything that God does. And there's a reason why God wants, us to give cheerfully, why he wants us to be humble, and why God decides to get our attention at these strangest times, and why he's chosen to get my attention now while I'm like, okay, God, I need your help, versus back then when I wasn't really looking to God for help. It's funny how we look more to God when we're struggling than when we're up on that mountain. And I think that's also why God's choosing now to try to get my attention versus back then when I wasn't really looking to God for help. So hopefully all those main points will mean something to you guys. Until then, I will see you guys in the next vlog. And always remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Have a great night or day, and peace out.